for this project, I'm going to show you how to make a hand that we're going to 3D print and put it on top of a box that we're going to later laser cut. So we're going to laser cut the box, put this hand that we 3D print on top of the box, and we're going to use cranks and cams to actually make this hand move so that we get a better understanding of how gears work inside of an animatronic hand. So let's go and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out a red cube, click on a corner. This front side is going to be 55. And you can tell this is the front here because it says work plane, and then the side is going to be 65. And I'm going to click on this white square in the middle. I'm going to change that to 10. Move this to the side. Bring out a blue wedge. Make sure you're inside basic shapes. A blue wedge. And I'm going to give this a height of 5. And then the width of this is going to be the same as this wedge here, which was 55. So I'm going to click on a white corner, 55. Now I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees. So I'm going to click on this curve here, this arch, and 180. And so now the wedge is facing towards the front. Now I'm going to select both of these shapes here. I'm going to click on align on the top right. Click on this corner over here so that they're lined up on the back side. And then in the center here, I'm going to click off the cube. I'm going to select it, and you could lock it if you'd like. I have the wedge selected, so I'm going to go ahead and drag that up. And I'm going to back out here. And I need this wedge going through the cube just by 1 millimeter. So if it keeps snapping like that, I could go over here. I could turn off the snap grid or move it down to 0.1. And you can see on the side here that the wedge is going through it just a bit. So I'm just going to change this to 9. And the reason why is because if this wedge is just sitting on top of this cube here, it's going to fall off when we actually 3D print these. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to bring out a cylinder. This is going to be for the thumb here. And I'm going to click on a corner. I'm going to change this to 10 by 10. And then we're also going to bring out a sphere. These will also be 10 by 10. Make sure you also change the height as well. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm going to rotate the cylinder. I'm going to move to the side here. I'm going to click on the arch from the side view, from the left view. I'm going to back out so I could see the degree that this arch is going to be rotated. I'm going to change it to 90. And then I'm going to select both the sphere and the cylinder by clicking and dragging my mouse over, or you could click, hold down shift and click on the other one. I'm going to click on align over here on the top right. Click on this middle align indicator. And then I'm going to go to the side here. I'm going to click on this middle align indicator as well. I'm going to go to top view. And I want to move about half of this cylinder into this sphere. So what you could do is you could use your arrow keys. If you tap the right arrow and move it over, it'll move it little by little. So you might have to go back to snap grid, change it to 1 millimeter, and it'll move a lot faster. And if I just quickly make this cylinder a hole, you can see about half of that cylinder is going through that sphere. All right, so this doesn't have to be a hole. I just wanted you to see that real quick. And I'm going to go back to top view. I'm going to click on this sphere, click on duplicate on the top left, and I'm going to move that sphere upward. So I'm going to hold down shift, click, and then drag up. Again, move about half of that sphere through that cylinder. I'm going to do the same thing with this cylinder. I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to click off of it, hold down shift, and then drag my mouse while also dragging that cylinder. Now I'm going to change the length of this cylinder here. So I'm going to click on the corner. I'm going to change the 20. I'm going to change it to 10. I'm going to select a sphere. Could you click on this middle one? Click on duplicate. And I'm going to click off of it, hold down shift, click on that sphere, and then drag up about halfway. I'm going to duplicate this cylinder. Click off, hold down shift, and then drag up. And I want to see just a little bit of that sphere there. These are going to be joints here. Any of these spheres are going to be the joints, and then these cylinders would be the bones. Okay, now I'm going to go to a top view. I'm going to group both the first cylinder and the sphere. So I'm going to hover over, click and drag my mouse over both those shapes, and then group on the top right. And I'm going to click on this arch. I want to rotate this cylinder and sphere inward towards the palm. This is going to be the palm here. And so let's do a -10. Click on top view, and I'm going to scoot this over. So I'm still in a 1mm snap grid. Used my arrow keys there. And if I want to make smaller measurements, I just change snap grid to 0.1. And then I'm going to also change this top cylinder, and I'm going to rotate this top cylinder. I'm going to change it to -10. And I'm also going to adjust this cylinder by using my arrow keys. And now I could select all of these shapes and group. I'm going to go from the side view. And I want to make sure that this finger is aligned with the palm here. So I'm just going to click this top triangle, this cone. I'm going to click and start dragging downward, but then you could actually see here on the right hand side how far away that thumb is from the surface. So I'm going to just tap it to 0. Click on top view, and then bring this thumb inward. So I'm going to click on the thumb, and I'm going to rotate it one more time. So I'm going to click on this arch. This arch is rotating all the shapes because they're grouped. So I'm going to click on the thumb, click on the arch, and I'm going to rotate this 8 degrees. And I want to make sure that my thumb is not going past the top of my palm here. And I'm probably going to move this thumb in just a little bit more. About half of that knuckle down there. Okay, now we're ready to start on the fingers. I'm going to drag out a cylinder. I'm going to click on a corner. I'm going to change the length and the width to 12. So both of those are going to be 12. And then I'm going to click on the top here. I'm going to change those to 25. And then we're also going to bring out a sphere. I'm going to change those to 12 as well. Click on a corner, 12, 12, and then don't forget to change the height by clicking on that white square on top. Now I'm going to click on the cylinder. I'm going to click on duplicate on the top left, drag it over. I'm going to change the height to 4. Click on that white square on top, change the height from 25 to 4. I'm going to click on that last cylinder. I'm going to rotate it. So I'm going to change my view here, click on that arch on top. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And I'm going to click on this cone here on top. So I'm going to click off, start dragging up. And you can see how far below the work plane that this cylinder is. So I'm going to click on 0 so it's above the work plane. And I'm going to select both that smaller cylinder and this first cylinder. And I'm going to align them. Click on this middle indicator here on the front, and then this side one here. And I'm going to click on this cylinder, the longer cylinder, without selecting that one that's in the inside there. I'm going to drag up about 520, so 5.2. And I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to click on this sphere, click on the cone that's on top. I'm going to click on the height here. I'm going to change it to 25. And then I'm going to align all of these shapes together. So I could click and drag over those two shapes. I could group those to make this a little bit easier. Click and drag my mouse over, align, click on this center indicator here. And then the same thing with this center indicator on the left hand side to center it. Okay, so I'm going to click on those two cylinders on the bottom. I'm going to ungroup because I want to use this cylinder here in the middle. And I'm going to select it and duplicate. And I'm going to change the height to 31. And so it moved it upward. I'm going to click off, click on that sphere in the middle. I'm going to duplicate that as well. And I'm going to change the height by starting to click up on that black wedge. I'm going to change it to 50. So it moves it upward. So we have the beginning of a finger here. And I'm going to click on this middle cylinder, duplicate one more time, and then I'm going to click that black triangle on top. I'm going to change the height to 55. With that top cylinder selected, I'm going to change the height of this top cylinder by clicking on the white square on top. I'm going to change it from 25 to 12. And so this will be your fingertips here. This will be the middle part of your bone and then the last part that connects to your knuckles here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that bottom cylinder. I'm going to click on duplicate. I'm going to move it over to the side here. And you might have to make sure that your palm is unlocked. We might have locked it earlier, so click on unlock, and that's going to allow me to select both the wedge and the palm. So click and drag your mouse over both of those. I'm going to group those two shapes, and I'm going to move this cylinder over to the edge here of that palm. So I'm going to select both. I'm going to click on align, and I'm going to click on this cylinder on the bottom right. And I'm going to do the same thing on this left hand side of the palm. I'm going to click on that one cylinder, duplicate, click and drag it over. So I held down shift and then just clicked on it and dragged it over. So click on that cylinder, click on the wedge, click on align, and then I'm going to click on this indicator on the left hand side, this align indicator on the left hand side to move it over to the left hand side. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on this cylinder on the left hand side. You can actually click either of these, but I'm going to click on this one here, and I'm going to click on duplicate. I'm going to click off, hold down shift, drag that cylinder out. I'm going to change the distance that I'm moving it to 4. I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to click on this length of that cylinder. I'm going to change it to 47. So both of these cylinders on the ends here are 4 millimeters. So that one's 4, this one's 4, and I'm trying to cover this space here in the middle between both of those cylinders. And so if we remember that the width of this palm was 55, so I subtracted 8 from 55 to get 47. This 47 here is going to be a hole. So I'm going to select all of those 3 cylinders, and I'm going to group them to make this a little bit easier. And I'm going to go to the top view and the side view here in a second. So I'm going to click and drag this back. I want both of these cylinders, about half of these cylinders, to be inside of that wedge here. So the way you could tell it's half is that this black indicator is the middle of that circle and all those 3 cylinders. So I'm going to click on the right view. I'm going to wait till that middle of that square there is centered with the edge of this palm. So now I need to click on those 3 cylinders. I'm going to ungroup because I actually want this cylinder here, that's a hole, to cut into this palm here. So I'm going to click on the cylinder, that's a hole, and I'm going to hold down shift, click on the palm and that wedge. I'm going to group those two, and it's going to cut out a hole. And then I want to group these 2 ends here. Hold down shift, click on the palm, and then group those as well. And then you can tell it's grouped because all these shapes are going to turn orange. So you can't see the sides of those circles in the cylinders. That's how you can tell that they're all grouped. Alright, so I'm going to go back to this finger, and we're going to duplicate these fingers here. And so I'm going to select all of these spheres and cylinders. So this whole finger, I'm going to group it to make this a little bit easier. Go to the top view, hold down shift, drag that other finger. And I want this bottom cylinder here to keep its size here. So I'm going to click on that finger, I'm going to ungroup, and I'm just clicking off here. I'm just click on that bottom cylinder, moving it to the side. So I'm just going to click on that bottom cylinder, move it to the side, and then click on undo to make sure that it's ungrouped. I'm going to select this top part of the finger. I'm going to regroup it. Alright, so the only thing that's not grouped is that bottom part there. And just to make sure that they're aligned, I'm going to hold down shift, click on the cylinders, and then drag it over. I'm going to duplicate this one more time. This is going to be for the pinky. And click on duplicate, hold down shift, and then drag it over to the side. Alright, so this cylinder here, right, so this cylinder is all by itself. I'm going to click on undo. I just wanted you to see that it's all grouped. I'm going to click on the bottom corner. So any of these corners will be okay, but I'm going to change it from 12 and I can change it to 8. This one's going to be 8. And then the height of this is going to be 58. So it was originally 61.8. This one's going to be 58. This finger here, I'm going to click on a corner. I'm going to change this from 12 to 10. 10. I'm going to change the height to 60. Then I'm going to click on this last finger here, which is going to be the pinky. I'm going to change it from 12 to 6. And then the height of 56. Okay, now I'm going to center these fingers here with that cylinder that we made at the bottom. So I'm going to click and drag these bottom two, click on align, and I'm just going to click on this center indicator here in the front. And then I'm also going to do the same thing with the side here. And then you can group those two. I'm going to do the same thing with this finger. I'll click off, click and drag, click on align, this front center indicator, and then the center indicator on the left hand side. Alright, so you can just double check to make sure that they're centered. And then group. And then same thing with this pinky here. I'm going to click the cylinder on the bottom and then the finger, click on align, this front indicator, and then the indicator on the left hand side, and then group. Okay, so now I'm just going to change this blue finger here. I'm just going to change it to orange so it's the same color. And I'm going to lie all of these fingers down. So I'm going to click on this finger here, which would be the index finger. I'm going to click on this arch here on top. And I'm going to change it to -90. You want this cylinder here, that's vertical, to be facing towards the palm here. Arch, zoom out if you have to. -90. This will be the ring finger, -90. And then the pinky arch, -90. And I'm going to select all these fingers, click and drag your mouse, click on align, and I want to line up these cylinders here on the bottom. So I'm going to click on this left indicator here on the bottom left, and now they're all lined up. I'm going to click on top view, and I'm going to click on align one more time. From the side view, I'm going to click on this bottom indicator here so that they're all flat, and these cylinders that are vertical are lined up. So now from the side view, I'm going to click off, select everything, and click on that black cone. I'm going to change the height that all these fingers are from the work plane. I'm going to change it to 0. I'm going to go back to the top view, and now you can move these fingers closer together. So right now what we want to do is I'm going to change snap grid and change it to 1. I'm going to start moving these closer together, and you just want a small gap here. So I'm just hitting the left arrow to move these closer together. You just want to make sure that there is some space between them, and you're not changing how close these vertical cylinders are to the palm, right? They should still all be lined up right now. Okay, so they look like they're lined up and that they will fit inside these two cylinders that are on the ends here. So I'm going to click and drag, and you could group these. I'm going to move them downward. I'm going to change the wedge here, or the palm, into a hole. And I'm just checking to make sure that my fingers aren't hitting the wedge here. So they're all grouped. But they're going inside that hole that we created. Okay, so I'm going to turn the palm and the wedge back to a solid. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to bring over a cylinder. So I'm going to bring out a cylinder. I'm going to change the width and the length of it to 2 millimeters. I'm going to change the height to 60. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lie this cylinder down, click on the arch on top, change it to 90 degrees, and I'm going to center it with these holes here. I'm going to drag it down to, let's do 4.9, and I'm going to turn that cylinder into a hole, and I'm going to drag it over. I'm going to change the color of this wedge here to red, just so you can see the difference between everything here. And I want this cylinder to go on the bottom part of these fingers here. So with these fingers selected, right, if they're not all grouped, make sure that the cylinders are all grouped, all the fingers are grouped. I'm going to go to top view. So these are the edge of the fingers here, the flat part of the fingers. And I don't want that cylinder to go through that flat part. Okay, so this cylinder is going through the cylinders that are on the edges, on the sides. They're also going through this cylinder. They're also going through that cylinder that's a vertical. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I just have one cylinder here. I'm going to duplicate that cylinder. And I'm going to hold down Shift. And I'm going to click on this wedge here, this wedge in the palm, and I'm going to group those, and it's going to create a hole on just the outside. Now I still have a cylinder there. I'm going to click on all these fingers. I'm going to hold down Shift. So now I have that other cylinder that I duplicated. I'm going to hold down Shift, click on all the fingers, and then group. And that's going to create a hole through each finger in the same spot. So I'm going to bring out another cylinder. I'm going to click on a corner, change both the width and the length to 2, and I'm going to drag it over to the side here. And I'm going to raise this cylinder 6 millimeters. So I clicked on that black cone, I drag it up. It starts telling you how far away from the work plane that your cylinder is, so I want to make sure that it is 6. And I'm going to turn this into a hole, and I'm going to duplicate this 3 more times. 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to click on one of these cylinders, hold down Shift, click over to the left hand side, and you could actually do the same thing with the other cylinders. You want to center it on top of each finger as best you can, and then we could always go back and align properly. So dragging over the pinky and the cylinder, you can ungroup if you'd like. So each finger is separate. So I have the pinky selected and that cylinder selected. I'm going to click on Align. So I'm going to center this cylinder and the finger by clicking on Align, the center indicator over here on the bottom. So that's centered. Do the same thing, cylinder, Shift, finger, Align, center indicator over here on the bottom. Same thing with the middle finger here, cylinder as the whole, the finger itself, Align, middle indicator, cylinder, finger, Align, center indicator. So now I'm going to rotate each of these fingers. Before you rotate each finger, you had this original cylinder that went through each finger and made a hole. So what you're going to have to do now is duplicate this hole. I have it selected already. I'm going to hold down Shift, click on the index finger, and then I'm going to click on Group. Now I'm going to move this to the side so you can see what it did. So now I can move this finger around, and it has its own hole over here. So I'm going to undo and move all these at the same time. So I'm going to click on that cylinder, duplicate, it's already selected. Now I just have to hold down Shift, click on the middle finger, and then Group. And you can just move it to the side and move it back just to make sure it has its own hole. Okay, cylinder, duplicate, it's already selected, hold down Shift, click on the ring finger, that has its own hole there. Undo. Now lastly, the pinky. This is the last one we need, so we don't have to duplicate. You can just hold down Shift, click on the pinky, and then group. Right? So now what we need to do is rotate each of these fingers so that these holes are facing towards the left. So I'm going to click on my index finger, click on the arch in the back, and then 9, 0. Same thing with each finger. These holes should be facing towards the left. Alright, so these cylinders that were originally vertical, they should all be horizontal now because they grouped the fingers and the cylinders together. Alright, so you can move these around now. And we're going to ungroup each finger, and we're going to change the angles of these fingertips and then the middle parts of the bones here as well. So I'm going to ungroup a finger, and you want to give yourself some space here because you're going to have a bunch of holes that you're going to have to regroup. Right, and a bunch of spheres that you're going to have to regroup. So you want to ungroup. So when you ungroup, you should see each sphere. Each sphere is going to be a joint for a finger, and then each cylinder should be orange. Right, so this is the last cylinder that we made for each of these fingers here. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to hold down Shift, click on just the middle part of the finger, and then group those two together. So if I clicked on that and dragged it, you should be able to see those two joints that hold the finger together. Alright, so each middle part of each finger needs to be rotated 45 degrees. So I'm going to click on just this middle part of the finger, click on this arch here down at the bottom, -45. The fingertips, those are going to be rotated 90 degrees. 90 degrees. So you're going to have to realign these fingers here. You might have to rotate these joints. And then you want to regroup everything for this one finger together. Right, including that cylinder that is now pointing vertically. So regroup. And each finger should look something like this. Okay, so you want to give yourself some space for each finger because you're going to ungroup a lot of parts for each finger. So I'm going to ungroup. Keep ungrouping until you see the joints and the cylinders for each finger. Now the first thing you want to do is when you ungroup everything is you click on that last cylinder that we made for each finger. Hold down Shift, click on the middle part of the finger, and it should look something like that, right? So middle parts of the finger should be rotated -45 degrees. Fingertips are 90 degrees. And then you want to align them. If you're having trouble lining these up, you can always go to Snap Grid, and then you can either turn it off or change it to the smallest meter there. And then you want to make sure that you regroup everything for each finger. I'm just going to change it orange. So I'm going to ungroup until I see each cylinder separately and each joint separately. Alright, first thing you do after you ungroup everything, click on that last cylinder that we made, hold down Shift, click on just the middle part of the finger, group those two together, rotate -45 degrees, fingertips 90 degrees, and then line everything up again. and then regroup everything for each finger individually. And then lastly the pinky, keep ungrouping. First thing you want to do, click on that last cylinder that we made, hold down shift, click on just the middle part of the finger, group those two together. Rotate this middle part. Now depending on how you're looking at these fingers, you might have to rotate it positive 45 degrees or negative 45 degrees. And then fingertips are negative 90 degrees. And when we resize some of these joints here, they probably got stretched out, so clicking on that arch for the joint, negative 45 degrees, so they're going the same direction. And then regroup. Okay, so your fingers should look something like this. Make sure that you get these fingers as close as possible together so that we take up the least amount of space in each of the 3D printers. Last thing you want to do is rename your files here. So it should be the name of the project, the last name, and then your first name. One last thing is you want to make sure that this thumb is grouped with this wedge here. Right, so those two should be the same color. Then you want to go to export and make sure that everything in the design is selected, and then export as an STL. If you just have one object selected or one item selected and you go to export, you might accidentally just export one individual finger. But even if you're inside this view here, you could click up here and it'll export everything, and then just make sure you're exporting as an STL. Okay, so if you have any questions of how to create these cylinders, which degree to move these fingers, how to group and export these files, go ahead and let me know. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And feel free to watch any of the other related videos.